Brand Identity Secrets: How to Create a Powerful Visual Brand That Connects. Do you want to know why some brands instantly connect and while others fall flat? Well, we've got an artist and brand identity expert, Tracey Hayim, who's going to reveal some secrets behind creating memorable visual brands that resonate with your audience. You'll discover why choosing your favorite color might be killing your brand instead of giving it the success that it deserves. We're going to hear lots of stories about even a lawyer who wanted to choose orange polka dots. You'll love that story. And a few others, including a brand that is revolutionizing the way we go about looking at brand identity at the moment, an Australian-based brand, and it's one to watch. You're also going to get some practical tips through this episode, creating a brand that speaks directly to your audience, avoiding common mistakes when refreshing your visual identity, and understanding when it's time to play safe versus when to be bold, adapting your brand as the audience evolves. So whether you're starting fresh or just considering a rebrand, this is a conversation you don't want to miss at Biz Bites. Stay tuned for this brand identity special. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Biz Bites, and we're going to talk all things brand identity today. And the person behind that is Tracey, and our paths have sort of crossed a fair bit over the years, but we've never actually sat down and had a conversation. So welcome to Biz Bites.
Thank you. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to be here sharing insights today. You.
Absolutely. Well, so let's kick things off by getting you to do a bit of an introduction as to who you are and all the various things that you cover, because people will notice some things going on in the background if you're watching on YouTube.
Okay, so my name is Tracey Hayim, and you can see my background is I'm a creative. I'm an artist, but I'm also a brand and graphic designer. My background is I always started from the back as an artist, and then went into art school, and then eventually studied graphic design and went into brand design and brand identity. And a little bit of a secret is that I was actually one of the first graphic designers to ever work on Adobe Illustrator version 1 on an Apple Mac in South Africa. So that is really my background, from painting by hand to drawing and designing on Adobe Illustrator and other platforms. And a lot of it is done, a lot of my work is actually working with brand identity and developing a brand identity and then implementing it across all your platforms so that you will leave a legacy that actually helps your business grow and have continuity.
Well, let's start at that high level, I think, for everyone. Tell me about the importance of brand identity, not just because I think there's two takes to this. There is the take that is the standard one that we know about consistency and things, but I think even more interesting, is in this current age, particularly of AI-driven things and that need to stand out and demonstrate some level of creativity and something unique. I think brand identity is becoming more and more important.
You know, it's interesting, and I think it's because people don't understand. I think for me, Anthony, what is the actual essential difference between, in marketing, between a brand identity and then kind of your marketing strategy and implementing your SEO and things like that to grow your business? Brand identity is a qualitative experience. It's how do you evoke the right emotion in your target audience, understanding psychologically who your target audience is, and giving them that story. It's like I always say, it's like giving a person a plate of food, and if that plate of food looks magnificent and it ignites all the senses, you're delivering a great meal. And for me, that is what your brand identity is. It actually takes you out into who you are as a person or a product and your individuality. And our role is to actually extrapolate that from a brand strategy meeting with what's your vision, who's your target audience, and what is the message you want to send? What is the afterthought? What is the legacy that you want to send to your customer? That's where we start, because it has to evoke that emotion on a visual perspective amongst all the other brand experiences. Your sight, I work on sight, but your sound and your reading is what you read and what you see should also be aligned. And I do think it actually makes a big difference to your product or services, whether it's to a client or to a business. It's essential.
Yeah, it is so critical. And I love the comparison to food in particular because it is such an invoking of all of your senses. But when you stop and think about brand identity, even whether you're going sort of the fast food brand identity and McDonald's, which has been so carefully crafted over the years, or whether you're going to the fine dining experience, the brand identity is very much there and front and center. And business needs to do the same thing. They need to have that same emotional thing and that same evocative story.
I agree. And I think, yes, we see it in restaurants, but if you see us today, people almost expect it because it, I mean, even if we look at all the software that's out there today, say, for example, Canva, it's so easy to create something fun and gorgeous, and the tools are there, but it's not actually that. It's understanding your client and the story, and it needs to be intentional. So often we go on our own and kind of create something, but is the intention, and that's part of that strategy, is the intention around the design speaking to the right customer or client. And my favorite actual brand, to be honest, Australian brand, is Who Gives a Crap, because I look at absolutely every piece of their brand identity and I go, it talks to me, it makes me laugh, it speaks in a psychological perspective to me, and it's fun and it's colorful, and they've literally changed the landscape. So there was something clever, and I think that is our goal as a brand identity specialist, is to say, where do you fit into the landscape or the brandscape of your particular brand and service? And I suppose it's very important for us to identify that in the brand identity journey, is where do you want to sit? Like, even now, look at the background, you've got books. Where do you slot in, and how will you stand out on that in that whole brandscape, or in a supermarket? And it makes a big difference with the colors and the fonts that you choose and the logo.
Absolutely is. I mean, there's a story that we're telling with our brand identity, whether you realize it or not. Whenever you meet someone new, whether you're meeting them in person or whether you're meeting them virtually, you are telling a story, and it's your willingness to be able to be consistent with how you tell that story, to keep it on brand. I mean, for example, if I were to show up today and wearing a, cut off shirt, that would tell a very different brand story to me wearing a business style shirt. And if I was wearing a tie and a jacket, it would tell a different story because I'm more of a creative person. So that doesn't really fit that mold as well. So
Correct.
every little thing subconsciously tells a little bit of a story for people to pick up on, even if you don't talk to it.
Absolutely. And I think when you say that, most people are visual learners. 60%, I think, of people are visual learners. Before they absorb any other information, they see what they see. Then they're going to read, and that's what they hear. So actually, that's why, to me, it's so impactful. If you want to create a fun product and you're using grays and pinks, and there's somebody serious on the screen or miserable talking to you, you'd go, it's not aligning. So absolutely, that intention with the colors and the what people see will definitely affect your market. So they say that if you don't define your market, the market will define you. And so you really are the person, as the brand owner, is to seek advice on how do I want to present myself in the world today on every single level. And I think, starting at visual, it's like a baby's born. The first thing they do is open their eyes. What do they see? Is they see the world, they hear the noises, and I think that's why you want to entertain that, because it does tell the story. And a great example is McDonald's.
Yes. And they do. They tell the story of who they are and what they're about and what they're trying to achieve really well. It's not, it doesn't mean that you have to copy that. And I think that's one of the interesting things too. So,
Yes.
and I'm sure you get that. I know I have in the past.
Yes.
And I may have recalled this conversation on Biz Bites once before, but this was a few years ago where I was sitting down in a cafe in the city in Sydney, and with a client who was talking about, oh, we need to update our brand identity. And he said, I want it to look like this. And he pointed to a bank. I won't say which one. He pointed to a bank that was in the building behind with its logo. And I looked at him and I've said, there is nothing about that brand identity that has anything to do with your brand. It is the wrong color. It is the wrong font. It is talking to the wrong kind of people at the wrong time of life compared to where you're at. Like, just the fact that you like that has nothing to do with your audience. And I think that is one of the hardest parts, isn't it? Because you mentioned it at the beginning. It's about understanding your audience and then understanding where you want to position yourself in relation to your audience. It's not about just going, this is what I like, so therefore everybody else is going to like it.
You've hit the nail on the head. And in fact, I was speaking to somebody the other day in one of my courses, and they were saying, how do you feel when the client comes to you and says, my favorite color is orange? And I'm going to be I'm a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, and most of my clients I'm a barrister and they're solicitors, and I want orange, like funky polka dot orange. And you'd go, do you think that's going to evoke the right feeling, orange? Maybe you need something that's more established. And yes, the color might be your favorite color, but it most certainly might not speak to your customer.
We hope you're enjoying listening to the Biz Bites podcast. Have you ever thought about having your own podcast, one for your business, where your brilliance is exposed to the rest of the world? Well, come talk to us at Podcasts Done For You. That's what we're all about. We even offer a service where I'll anchor the program for you. So all you have to do is show up for a conversation. But don't worry about that. We will do everything to design a program that suits you, from the strategy right through to publishing and of course helping you share it. So come talk to us, podcastdoneforyou.com.au, details in the show notes below. Now back to Biz Bites.
And you'd go, do you think that's going to evoke the right feeling, orange? Maybe you need something that's more established. And yes, the color might be your favorite color, but it most certainly might not speak to your customer and evoke a serious, professional, established relationship. And the font, like behind you, you've got Being the Voice of Brilliance. It's fun. It's a script. Well, that might not work if you are working in a government department.
Correct.
So it's very, very intentional, is choosing those fonts and understanding them as being part of your brand experience, and how you communicate. It really is important. So
yes, and being consistent is part of that process as well. Is that the document that I think in business that you should refer back to the most is around your brand identity. And yet so few people do, right? They get it. They might have a 1 page or a multiple page document, and the amount of times they actually go back and refer to it is probably once a year if you're lucky. And yet it's a thing that's so intrinsic to what you're doing and how you're presenting yourself each and every day. And it's amazing how quickly it goes off the rails.
Absolutely. And I suppose because it's an aspect of your business strategy as well. And if you want to keep people in line as your team, putting it out there as I was at my husband's office, and their vision, their identity, their mission all of that and the language and the tone is written actually within the walls and the halls so that people are living it. And that goes back to actually your visual identity, is it becomes part of it. Where are you going to place this information? Where are you going to access it? Is it in your office space? Is it on your screens? And that's actually what I love to focus on, is that in our world today, we've got so many touch points. You might be in a podcast, you might click on your podcast in a website, and then it leads you to an external software site. Everything needs to be made clear that we are in the same office, if you want to call it, that your brand is there. When you're going to LinkedIn, that you hit on your profile, your brand is there, so that the same photo. People think, oh, I'll use a photo, for example, of myself, one from 30 years ago and one from 10 years ago. And then your client, if it's personal branding, goes, who's that person? Is that the person I just saw? I'm confused. Those are to me very important parts of the visual identity, is being very clear and very consistent with the same visuals so that it helps your client move along and have an easy experience within your brand.
Yeah, and it is something that you have to review, don't you? I mean, it's not because your audience changes, and I think
Correct.
that's one of the things that escapes people as well, is that it's change because of circumstances and things that are changing around you, not change for the sake of change, but also don't not change just because you can't be bothered, or because it's because you can be saying a lot by having a brand that just feels dated.
Correct. It's interesting you talk about that you have to reassess and realign. That is part of my product process or system, is that, you define it, you then align it, and then you create your mood boards, and then you design it. But then my next one is realign or transform it. But you still have to go back and realign it to define it. And it's true, you could have a business. People think, my business is doing well. I've been going for 20 years. But you actually, in that 20 years, if you're a retail store, you could be selling a product that actually is, your target audience has changed. Or the target audience that you had is, you define them, they're 30-year-olds, they're now 60-year-olds, and actually, you know what? You need to start bringing in new target audience. You might be looking at 20-year-olds. That means your brand needs to change the identity, because the photo usage and the styling and the logo might just not speak to a younger person. So that is why you absolutely do need to realign it.
Yeah, and I think again, I see too often the realignment of just trying to make it fresh for the sake of making it fresh is also not right. It is realigning with who your audience is and where they're at, and understanding those changes and those things. I've seen a brand redone recently. I won't say which one,
Yes.
and I went back to the CEO and I said, I wasn't involved in the branding process, but I went to the CEO, who I know reasonably well, and said, you are making a mistake. The color that you have chosen will not resonate with your audience.
Wow.
It also looks terrible online.
Wow.
And it's quite often, and I've seen it happen. And I think this is why, I wanted to speak to you, because I know that you spend a lot of time working on understanding audiences, because there are a lot of designers out there, because it's relatively easy to set yourself up as a designer and not have that background and simply go in and do what they think looks good. And I think I've seen it done over the years. I'm sure you'd be equally frustrated by people who go onto the likes of Upwork and they simply put in going, I am a lawyer, please create a new brand identity for me. And I literally had this a couple of years ago with one of my
Yes.
friends who said, I've done this. He had 100 different responses come back of ideas. And I said, look, I'll help you sort through them and work out which is the right one. Only one of them was even close to being where he should be. 99 of them were just horrible and had no relationship whatsoever to his audience. And the one that did was more a fluke than it was because it was, there was not a proper brief. There was not a proper consideration of who the audience is. And I think all of those things, don't underestimate the time and effort that you need to put into doing that, because it also helps in your communication process in other aspects when you actually understand your audience.
Absolutely. Gosh, you so on my page, I can't even tell you. And it's almost like a frustrating thing to be out in the world and see that people want to be a designer. I suppose it's the same as going, you can't be a brand designer if you're a copywriter. A copywriter is focused on the writing. A visual person is somebody who really has an eye for detail. In the background you see a painting. You're seeing on that side you're seeing the orchid. That's the start of an abstract painting of an orchid. You realize that it takes a visual intelligence and a build-up of intelligence to absolutely help you identify your brand logo. It means that you not only have to respect your client and their requirements, but you also have to deliver something that is going to grow their business. And that can only be done when you've done the research. And so research is so important. I just redid a whole brand website and a brand experience for a swimwear brand. And the research I did was far more valuable than anything else because it gave us insight to what clients wanted, her target audience. I went straight to her specific target audience. And the feedback we got actually helped us build something that was successful, visually appealing, functional within her budget. But the funny thing is that she gave me her logo. It was already designed. So this is an important thing to remember, is go and get it done at the foundations and the start of your business instead of investing in something that might not be right. Because what she did is she designed her swimwear and she invested in having all the labels printed with her logo. But the feedback was, we don't like that. Can't even read it. But it was too late to change it. So for me, the important thing is start well. I have a brand starter kit. Start with that. Invest with that. Have the strategy, have the research done, and at least it's like a baby being born. You give it a proper name with intention. Give your business that start, a good start.
Yeah, because it is often done on a whim, and that then carries forward for many years to come, and then suddenly you've got what was never really spot on in the first place. The accumulation of that is taking you further and further away from your audience, and so if you feel like you've done that, now is the right time to absolutely stop and go, let's relook at this, because the further you wait and the further you get down the track,
Yes.
the more territory that you have to reclaim.
Absolutely. I agree. Anthony, it's actually really so wonderful speaking to someone who's experienced this. You're in the marketing world. You understand that a logo is not just a pretty face. It's actually something that you're going to live with for a long time. You want it to be that. You might, and when we do look at, let's look at Combank, and we look at some of even Amazon, or which is a favorite brand in the world, or Google, it could be that it looks the same and you change it subtly over time accordingly, which happens a lot, but the essence of it is still there. But the logo is the one thing, but it's still the story. And how do you connect visually to your customer? And yes, realigning, because your customer might change, the environment might change, and you do really need to reassess those things. But it's always about the questions, asking the right questions.
Yes, and I think I want to know where you stand on this as well, because one of the things that I've always said to
Yes.
people around brand is that when you first get something back to have a look at, you should feel a little bit uncomfortable, because if you're too comfortable with the brand that you've got in front of you, the likelihood is that you're making a very conservative choice that's going to get boring very quickly,
I love.
and that your audience is not necessarily going to love. So that if you feel a little bit of discomfort, it's probably the right way to go.
I love that. It's actually really interesting because you say that, and maybe as a designer, if I receive that, it's quite a hard thing to say if the client goes, oh, you give two options, and I often do for feedback. You're saying like the more risky one could be actually the better one because it's going to make you stand out, right? I did it for some builders, and I wanted to do fluoro pink, and I wanted them to wear those hats, the hard hats in fluoro pink, because I said nobody does that. Like everybody's wearing the same standard, but if you came onto site with these fluoro pink hats, you're dealing with if you're building homes with the woman, she'd love it. She'd think it's so cool. So just you'd be connecting with her rather than the people you work with. You'll actually be talking to your customer, and you'd look a little bit different. But actually, it was very risky for them. They didn't take the idea. They went for the safe color.
And because I've we're telling stories, and I think this is, and the reason I wanted to share lots of these stories with the audience is I think this is where you learn. I worked with an organization a few years ago
Yes.
now, and the short version of the story is the organization ended up taking it through a process internally without allowing the external experts to be part of that process. What happened was they chose the brand that was almost the furphy that was in there. Often I'm sure when you present brands and you present them with a few options, there's usually one choice that you go, look, we wanted to show you where we started from, but it's not really the right choice. What happened was that was the choice they made. And it was the wrong tagline, it was the wrong logo, it was just everything was wrong about the choice that they made. But because
Yes.
they just allowed themselves to float into the comfort zone. So what they chose was something that was not going to make them stand out, which is part of the process, right? There's no point building a visual identity that makes you sit basically amongst the crowd. This is not a school uniform that you're creating so that every student looks the same. You're trying to create something that enables you to express who you are as a business, how you, as we said at the beginning, evoke emotions with people and stand out for the right reasons in the right way.
I love that. Oh, wow. I'm learning a lot from you, I have to say. Thank you, Anthony. You're 100% correct. It's really important almost to detach yourself and then trust the experts. I think as an expert, I definitely respect my client and I want to deliver something that they love. I always say, love your brand. However, it comes with that difficult process is that you've got to go through the research, the asking, and externalizing it instead of internalizing it. Ask people who are your potential customers, how do they receive it? How do they feel about it? And don't rely on your own self to make those decisions.
And also don't ask family and friends. That's the other big tip I give people. Please don't ask your family and friends what they think, because the chances are they are not your core audience.
Correct.
And so they're as lovely as they are, as much as we love our family and friends, their opinion does not matter unless they are 100% in your core audience
Yes.
for your brand.
Agreed. And so we're coming back to the beginning, and the part of the brand strategy to develop and design is definitely to research the brandscape, your vision, your pillars, your purpose, and research it with that target audience. Do it. Ask those questions, get the research done, because that will help define with your story, and the research will define your end product and your end goal as a brand identity.
I know how important it is. I mean, my couple of my most recent clients that we're doing podcasts done for
Yes.
you for, and they've come with very strong brand identities. And so when we're creating the graphics for the podcast itself, it's like, this is the guidelines, this is where we are. No, don't, that image doesn't really quite fit, and we make these little tweaks and things. And that's right. I love working with that. I love working within those parameters, because
Yes,
it's very clear as to who they are, and we're not just trying to create something with no knowledge.
correct.
I wanted to ask you a little bit differently, because we touched on a little bit, and you've got this beautiful piece of art that's behind you. Tell me about the journey, because the balance between graphic design is quite different to art in terms of painting and that,
Yes.
and working in that way, but they have an influence of one another, and they're great creative outlets. And they too have even though that is not necessarily for business, the art that you display in business can have an impact on your brand identity as well. So
Yes.
I love how you find the blend between working in those two quite different spaces, yet can have some relationship.
It's interesting, a great question. For me, actually, imagine 10 years old, wanted to be a graphic designer, had no idea what graphic design was, except that at that time it was a commercial artist. I think for me, it was like I could make money with being creative and have a purpose, because graphic design, when you look at actually where does graphic design come from, the history of it actually stemmed almost within the art world. When we look at Bauhaus and Kandinsky and all these artists, Kandinsky was the most profound, he had the most profound influence on graphic design and color, because he literally utilized it. His background, he was a lawyer. And I think as a designer, you need to have the fundamental understanding of drawing, shape, form, color, light, and definition. All of those techniques are very, very important foundational skills for a designer. You can't just be a designer. In fact, you have to have a good eye. You can be even a photographer. You can get a photographer and you can get an unbelievable photographer. And how do I define that? It's somebody who's got a great eye. They actually see. I've worked with and taught a lot of children art and creativity. Everyone can be creative, everyone. But have you got a great eye for it? It's almost like, have you got a great eye to compose music? The understanding comes from color, is the subtleties of color. If you are going to be designing, you've got to understand the color palette. And the other thing is that what you're seeing behind me is paint. It's a pigment. It's kind of like the history of color. Paint was invented long before a color screen was invented. Color has changed over time. As a designer and an artist, they're actually integrated. My learnings with art are that it's my own self-expression. However, you can be an illustrator. And an illustrator needs to know how you're commercializing it and you're creating a story, but you still need to understand how to draw. So there is that connection, and it's also about expression. The one can be more freely expressed, whereas your brand identity, what's the commonality are all the learnings around color and shape and form and composition and scaling, for example. Those are all the things you need to understand. But you're now talking to a technology and you're selling it. So it has to be able to be scalable, used easily, but pattern making and ideas will come from the creative process. So the research is I would say then going back is the quantitative. You're going to need to do the quantitative because you're going to need to know who you're actually doing the work for. And the qualitative is the art, it's the creative space. Is then once you understand that, you bring it together and you use your creativity. So it's kind of like a child and a parent. You need both. In order for a child to grow strong and be well-rooted, they need the guidelines. Design has the guidelines. Graphic design is a guideline. There are key elements for great design that you learn within it. And then you step back to Kandinsky. Kandinsky was first an artist. He then worked for Bauhaus. He had a massive influence on color theory, but it came from him working and mixing with color paints. All in history, all the posters for Impressionists come to theatre in France were the artists designing the posters. That is the history of graphic design. Art Deco, Art Nouveau, they all came from the arts. But then it was the craft and the art that influenced it. And then it led it into the history of graphic design. So graphic design is a way of communicating effectively with expression to your right target audience. You can't be designing it for yourself. You are designing it for somebody else, your audience. And I think that's there are those similarities, right?
Absolutely, I love all of that, and it's such it's that woven story which is an important aspect, and it's something for businesses to understand that it is a process, and it does say so much. And I think even the artwork itself that you might have hanging in an office says a lot about who you are as a brand, and tells its own story, just like, I mean, for example, tell me about the story of the painting that you've got behind you.
Okay, well, actually, so interesting. So I didn't touch on that about, yes, if you've got a brand and you're in a specific office, say technology, you would probably want to kind of think about what type of artwork you're going to put into your office. In my office, which is my studio, what you're seeing now is I have actually just completed the Archibald. I did a self-portrait. Sitting behind me was a self-portrait of myself. This painting is, I like to paint. Why? In the moment, spur of the moment. That is where I get my inspiration. And I like to start abstracted just to loosen up, because the creative process, even if it was in design, is you need to loosen up and open up to brainstorming. When I create here at the start, what inspired me is behind me. That it's funny, I put this in the background, but the orchids were sitting in my studio, which I recently bought for a photo shoot. And I thought I love flowers. They just bring me a lot of joy. Joy is one of my highest values. And so I started painting this. Yellow is also, so here, talk about yellow. Yellow's joy. It's a low chakra. It's your earthly chakra. It grounds you. It's emotional. And I wanted something that was joyful. And I think I was celebrating. So psychologically, color definitely connects us. And we might not even know it if you're not aware of it. But you might actually, if you wanted to open up your awareness to the intention of why you're choosing colors. If you are low in energy, you might have tomatoes. And for creativity, orange is fun. You start eating it. These are ways of healing your body with color. And I'm passionate about it. And so I put it into this. You can see in this canvas is that it's yellow, and they're purples and pinks. They're opposite colors on the color wheel. And so that's what it is about understanding color and tone. These are kind of a little bit more opaque colors, they tone down colors. And that's what actually happens with people who don't understand color. They might choose purple, and they choose a very bright purple, but you might want a toned down purple. And how do you create that? So that is what I'm painting in my studio. It's spur of the moment. This is the beginning of it. I might leave it for a few months. It's not like a deadline for a brand. When there's a deadline, you deliver. This might stay like this for about 6 months until I finish it.
It's never finished. If you're a true artist, it's never finished, right? There's always something that you're going to work on.
I love that. It's true.
It's, the connection of art, and why I thought it was so important to have a chat with you today, is that in the day of AI is starting to dominate the headlines, if you like. And I think the one thing that is going to continue to be promoted is actually a resurgence of the arts, a resurgence of creativity, because as much as there are tools out there like Canva that can do a lot of things, and even you can use your various AIs and can create graphics, it's not the same. They can only operate within the parameters of which they've been fed.
Yeah.
Whereas the creative human brain has the opportunity to develop something that has never been seen before. And that, I think, is where it's so important to understand that is going to continue to differentiate you, and where, you tapping into these resources is important. And I think the part of this, which I just wanted to touch on finally, which perhaps goes into some other spaces that you're in as well, it's opening up people to creativity, because it's not necessarily about, not all of us are going to become artists. I know I'm terrible at painting and drawing. That's not my skill set. It's more in verbalizing things or in written form. But the point is to open up creativity in whatever space you are in allows you to create new opportunities for your business to grow. And I think that kind of ability to inspire people, whether it is through your brand identity, through a painting, or through some sorts of classes and things that you can do together, is so invaluable, I think, for business.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know what I say? There's human intelligence. Human intelligence created mechanical intelligence and artificial intelligence. It took a human being to imagine the World Wide Web. It took a human being to create artificial intelligence. They have created an unbelievable world for human beings, but we are the creators. And we must not forget that.
I think I'm going to just starting to wrap things up, but I'm going to reference back to a Biz Bites episode recently. And Igor, if you're listening in, I appreciated this because he said when we were discussing AI that he doesn't believe that the I should stand for intelligence, because the thing about it is, all it is a set of data that it's reconfiguring. So it's not necessarily intelligence in the human way that we think about it. And I think that's a really interesting idea, and one that I think is important in the discussions that we've had today. Just to wrap things up, I wanted to ask you the one question that I like to ask all of my guests. What is the aha moment that people have when they start working with you that you wish more people knew they were going to have in advance, so they come flocking towards you?
It's interesting. That's a great question. And thank you for asking. It's interesting. For me, what brings me joy in what I do is when my client goes, "Oh my God, you've got it for us. You've delivered. It's right. It's great." Because for me, I'm almost the facilitator. So when they go, yes, that's what we want. Yes, let's tick it off. It's done. It's great. Because the creative process is about what you like and what your client, your audience is going to like, the client and the audience. When that comes together and you get that, I feel like I've won the jackpot. Is that they go, I love it, because it is about me expressing. I'm a facilitator for my client. So when they say you hit the brief, you got it right, that's really important. Hopefully they will value more the brand strategy, because for me, that is actually where the creativity comes from, and that's the research and the really honing down on the detail. But yes, the aha moment is when you say, you got it. You got what I'm thinking in my head. You put it out there.
Fantastic. Tracey, thank you so much for being part of Biz Bites. There's so many things that we've covered today, and I hope it's given people listening in today lots of insights and tips on how to think about and value, I should say, their brand identity and the consistency for that, and how much it says about what you are and where you're going, I think is so important. So thank you so much for all of your insights.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show, Anthony. It's been wonderful, really wonderful. I appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. And of course, to everyone listening in, take a look at the show notes. We will have lots of information about how to get in contact with Tracey. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned, subscribe, and keep listening in for the next episode of Biz Bites.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Biz Bites. We hope you enjoyed the program. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Biz Bites is proudly brought to you by Podcasts Done For You, the service where we will deliver a podcast for you and expose your brilliance to the world. Contact us today for more information. Details in the show notes. We look forward to your company next time on Biz Bites.